Is it strange that after this game, I don't even want to talk about the game because there was so much that happened in the game that didn't relate to the final score of the game that I feel like if I talked about the game, I wouldn't have time to do the not game stuff justice. And so, for the first time in the history of this channel, I'm not going to talk at length about the happenings of the Golden Knights' third preseason game, their home opener of the preseason, which resulted in, unfortunately, a 4-3 overtime loss to the LA Kings. But that final score and the storylines that are within that final score, I can't do them justice by going period by period, play by play. And so I'm going to try and do this one a little bit differently. We're going to break down the major happenings of the game, obviously, but also we're going to look at some of the things that were said after the game and during the game. And we're just going to see how this one goes, because this one was fun. This was more fun than a preseason game is supposed to be. And so, of course, with this being the Golden Knights' first game in the Fortress since winning the Stanley Cup, that has its own fanfare and that has its own kind of air about it. And the one thing that I really enjoyed watching and looking at is the new center ice logo. That's a new thing to look forward to at the beginning of every season. And this year's is honestly a lot of fun. At first, it looks like it's just a great center ice dot for the Golden Knights. They do something special every year. I remember the stained glass window. I remember the second year logo, which looked kind of like a coin. But this year's different because not only is the little dragon in there from the playoff run, and also that's found its way into the Script Sport broadcast, but you have to really look for it there. The center logo looks like the top of the Stanley Cup. So, say you won the Stanley Cup without saying you won the Stanley Cup. It's permanently on the floor for the next season. So that's a thing. That's a thing. This preseason game will also mark the first night where there'll be a lot of higher-end players on the ice for the Golden Knights, primarily Jonathan Marchessault, Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Chandler Stevenson, Alex Pietrangelo, and Alec Martinez. And, of course, Adin Hill. And a couple of other NHLers that don't quite come to mind. I'm looking at them right now. Yes, Howden was also in the lineup. I'm a little rusty. And the line to watch in this game, obviously it jumped off the page, was Eichel, Marchessault, and Brendan Brisson, who, as fate would have it, would actually have an exceptional first period, as Brendan Brisson would get a reasonable setup and would ultimately wind up scoring on a feed from Jack Eichel, who got the puck from Jonathan Marchessault. Brendan Brisson's first goal of the preseason, I believe in his first or second game of the preseason. I can't remember if he played in the weekend set. And so with it being 1-0, the Golden Knights look like they're going to run away from what is essentially the Ontario Reign AHL team, who the Kings have just decided to dress up and make look professional. And that would be indicated by a few minutes later, after the Golden Knights scored the first goal. Hodgson would take a penalty. More on him later. Trust me. He'd take a penalty and put the Golden Knights on the power play, and it wound up being about a $40 million power play versus a penalty kill that was worth about $7 and some gum that I found on the sidewalk. And so when you put Mark Stone, Jack Eichel, and the Conn Smythe winning Jonathan Marchessault on a power play against a penalty kill held together by duct tape and hope, things aren't going to go very well. And that's exactly what happened, as the puck movement was just obscene on this power play. High to low, low to high. Jack Eichel ultimately got the puck at the top of the circle, ripped it down to Stone on the goal line, who just laced across crease past to Marchessault, who was wide open on the back post behind JF Berube. And that's all she wrote, 2-0, very early on in the game. And not to count out the goalies, as Adin Hill had yet another solid game. He hasn't made a start yet this preseason, but I'm just kind of carrying over what he did in the playoffs. He looked very solid in this first period, and he looked very solid throughout the whole game, even though the scoreline doesn't exactly reflect that fact. And ultimately, Hill would make a good save on a 2-on-1 at the end of the first period, and that would be it for period number 1. And with that first period, it actually looked like Golden Knights hockey again. It was very nice to see a familiar, comfortable offense and some higher-end defensive talent. And Brendan Brisson looked pretty good on a line with Jack Eichel and Jonathan Marchessault. It's very helpful that he's a very high-skill guy. Unfortunately, though, events in the second period, which we will cover in a moment, would end up bumping Brisson down the lineup a little bit, not for any fault of his own, not for lack of production, but more because there was a bigger fish to fry. I'm going to gloss over another very dominant power play in the first 5 minutes of the second period for the Golden Knights and skip ahead to the moment you've all been waiting for. the hit. Wait, you're meaning to tell me they actually hit people in the preseason? Usually that answer is no, but for some reason, the LA Kings decided to do the one thing you don't do. You took a run at the captain. No. Alex Pietrangelo played the puck behind the net, and Mark Stone got the puck there and is ready to move it. He moves it, and then he waited a second, and then he continued to count to 3, and then Hodgson decided to just come in and blow him up. Just completely blew him up for absolutely no reason. And there's no real way to describe what happened next other than just a sheer, visceral, angry reaction. Not from Mark Stone. Well, yes, from Mark Stone, but not just from Mark Stone, as Stone's not even gotten up off the ice yet, and Brett Howden's already just bear hugging the guy, basically trying to manhandle him to the ice. Petrangelo's there, Martinez is there, and then Stone gets there. And from that point onwards, it's just complete and utter pandemonium. And so you're telling me Mark Stone was the one who did some aggressing? And ultimately, these fisticuffs wouldn't exactly calm down for a little bit, as Stone did eventually get out from under the pile, but he was still looking to get his point across. I don't know what was said, and I don't even want to know, but I'm terrified of what was, but the broadcast cuts to like the wide shot, and Mark Stone has a Kings player, I can't remember who it was, just grabbed by the front of the jersey, and he is just screaming at the guy. And I could only imagine what was being said. What do you think's going on over there? I don't know, something about hell on earth. It's very obvious that this whole interaction rubbed the Golden Knights captain the wrong way. When he got back to the bench, the Scripps Sports broadcast panned over to him, and he is just staring deadpan into the distance. I swear, if you were to like drop a tomato in front of his vision, it would just like instantly vaporize. That's how hot Mark Stone was in this moment. Ultimately, it wound up not actually doing what the Golden Knights had hoped for, as the Golden Knights would get scored on next. And then Ben Hutton would score late at the end of the period on just a absolutely stupid, really good spin move from the 7th defenseman in the Golden Knights organization. I didn't know he had a spin move in him. Ben Hutton just made some space on the wall and came off of it, got into the middle, and then when he got to the middle, he just pulled a little turn and shoot, hoisting it past Berube and giving the Golden Knights, reestablishing that 2-goal lead, and the Golden Knights would take that lead into the intermission. The temperature of this game was so much higher than it should have been, and there's even more on that to come. Unfortunately for the Golden Knights, this second period would kind of be the high watermark for the game, as the third period would begin with a penalty, which wouldn't result in anything, and then a penalty, which would not result in anything for the Kings, except for a penalty shot for Ron Bjerg, who didn't score, and then a subsequent power play afterwards, which the Golden Knights did nothing with. And then the guy who scored the Kings' first goal would score again, and then with the goalie out, he would score again, and the game would head to overtime, which is incredibly disappointing for how good the Golden Knights looked in this game, but again, it's the preseason, so no big deal. Golden Knights would have a couple of good opportunities in overtime, none of which being able to find Twine, and then with less than a minute to go in overtime, Pietrangelo would kind of lose coverage, and or an AHL filler player who's trying to make a name for himself started cherry picking, got behind Pietrangelo, Hill went for the diving poke check, missed, and the game's over. The Golden Knights blew a 2-0 and 3-1 lead at home in the preseason, mind you. This doesn't matter, it's in the preseason. And ultimately fell to the LA Kings, basically AHL team, 4-3 in overtime. Now, where do we begin about the after-game shenanigans? We could start with the way that the hockey media has written about it. I was listening to NHL Network on my way back from school today, a day of recording this, so this was about 2.5 hours ago, saying that, people in the LA Kings media are saying, the Ontario Reign beat the Golden Knights Stanley Cup defending team. It's proof that they're washed. Whatever. Who cares? And to fully illustrate the who cares nature, all you have to do is look at Mark Stone's comments after the game. And Mark was already my hero. He's already one of my favorite players as it is. But the way that he handled this, the way that he immediately, in like 2 sentences, put down the entire team and put to bed the entire discussion about the game is just so eloquent. I found the original quote from Jesse Granger from The Athletic, and then the video on Twitter of Mark Stone being asked about the game after the game is probably going to go viral in the hockey world, along with the hit, because the hit's already gone viral. And the comments from Stone went something along the lines of this.
So, Mark, what do you have to say about that hit?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what happens when you're, not that good and you're only going to play one game at the NHL level. You may be good and all, you may think you're good, but I just won the Stanley Cup, and so you might want to go back to the hole that you think you came from and stay there. Period. And so, yeah, did the Golden Knights lose to essentially the Ontario Reign? Yes. And did Mark Stone get very, very angry for his first preseason game coming off of a Stanley Cup? Yes, he did. And what do we learn about this? We learned that this team has a lot of fight in them. And I'm kind of looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs and their acquisition of Ryan Reeves to see how, they're going about being tough by one player. And when the hit happened on Stone tonight, I got a text from my brother saying, I can hear Keegan Colasar suiting up right now. And I thought that was hilarious because it's partially true. And I would have given so much money to see Colasar and Nick Hague this game instead of Brett Howden and Alec Martinez, even though they provided plenty of fireworks of their own. What this tells us is that this Golden Knights team, even though it's the third game of the preseason, and the preseason basically abolished hitting 10 years ago, there's fight, there is fire, and they're competing. And also they know that they, one, shouldn't be losing these games, but two, they don't really matter that much. It didn't look like anybody was too upset about the loss. It didn't look like anybody was too dejected about the fact that they lost to the Kings. And more, it looked like they were just mad at the one guy for taking the run at their captain, which is the one thing you're allowed to be mad at and one thing you're allowed to take a number over. I guarantee you if the American League guys in Henderson who were in this game, basically Lucas Cormier, Jonas Rondbjerg, they see this guy in the Dollar Loan Center or wherever the Ontario Reign play, you best believe he will not leave that arena without being assisted out of there in the first time they play against the Henderson Silver Knights. You just don't do that. No. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still a 4-3 loss, and the Golden Knights continue to fall to 0-3 for the preseason. But big whoop, it's the preseason. As we get further on, there's 4 games left to go in the preseason, the next of which is on Friday, and that game kicked off 4 in a row at home for the Golden Knights. And so that's good, obviously. We're going to get more NHL regulars in the lineup as the preseason goes, and I'd imagine the games will get more competitive, and it will start to look more and more like the team that won the Stanley Cup just a few short months ago. So with that being said, I don't know how to comprehend this game. It was one of the most entertaining preseason games I've seen this year, and that's saying something because the Flames beat the Canucks 10-0 earlier this week. But it was still fun, and hockey is back, and so it's very exciting. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to comment down below, interact with me, like, subscribe if you really enjoyed it, tell all your friends, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.